All right, I am super excited to be talking to Victoria MacRae-Samules. She, believe it or not, the first woman to hold the title of Vice President of Operations of a, wait for it, bourbon distillery. She is at Maker's Mark, and she is with us today. Victoria, thank you so much for taking the time.
Tracy, it's absolutely my pleasure. I'm very glad to be here.
Now, I have to apologize because I missed you last week while you were in Manhattan because you won. Whiskey Magazine gave out their Icons Awards, and you won Distillery Manager of the Year for the second year in a row. That is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be recognized and to be among the people in the industry.
Speaking of the industry, though, we have to talk about women in the industry or the lack thereof. But before we even get there, people have to know your story because I find it so fascinating that you're actually a West Coast girl and somehow you end up in Kentucky raising your family. So if you could, give us the quick synopsis.
Quick synopsis. Grew up in Seattle, Washington. I was living in San Francisco after grad school and traveled a little bit across the United States and seeing the sights and ended up at the home of Booker Noe, as we know, Jim Beam's grandson. And he decided that since I was a chemist, a theoretical chemist by nature, actually, and by education, he wanted to do some R&D and really understand more about what happens in the barrel with bourbon. So he hired me to move to Kentucky and join his team then of one, R&D chemists. And I did just that at the very beginning of 1989.
Wait, but how do you just end up in Jim Beam's grandson's house?
Well, that's a good question. But if you recall back in the 80s, I was working for a company and did quite a bit of traveling outside of San Francisco. So I came to the different offices that were located near Kentucky. And some people had traveled in Kentucky and they knew some friends, and so we came over to Kentucky and to Bardstown.
So he was just like in your circle.
Yeah, and through work at the time.
That's amazing.
So it was a very interesting conversation, and it was, it's all about opportunity, isn't it?
It sure is.
We move through our careers, we fall into, we meet someone, we have a dinner, and then they present an opportunity, and if I think if we're smart, we step into it.
Oh, amen to that. But I love, too, that you pointed out that, so your background actually is in biology and chemistry, and that there is a science to this, to bourbon making, to wine making, to all of it. It is such, to me, it's one big fat scientific equation.
Well, it is. And when I was in graduate school, I went to the University of Puget Sound for undergrad in chemistry and math, and then graduate school at University of Washington. And when I was studying different parts of chemistry and theoretical chemistry, you have lab fermentation and you have lab distillation and all of that. Well, coming here, you apply that, but there's very much of an art to bourbon making as well. There's a creative side to it. I think that not so many people realize, because look at our founder. Look at Bill Sr. and Marge in their creative founding of a new mash bill using wheat for Maker's Mark. They had to kind of think outside the box. Now, the science comes into play for making sure that our processes are standard, that our quality control is just as tight can be, and that we really are monitoring every step of the way of the process that the founders created.
I mean, the Maker's Mark in particular, eight generations of doing that's like 200 years. That's crazy, right? And so the history behind this is so amazing. I think it makes it even more amazing that you get to this position. So in 2010, they made you vice president of operations, and you said that it turned out to be pretty historic.
Yes, it did. It turned out to be historic. Of course, joining Beam in 1989, I actually worked my way through the distillery. So I came out of the lab, and I was the first woman distillery supervisor at Beam over the distillation process itself. And that was a relief position, so it was a lot of on the ground, really learning the process, and then processing manager, quality manager. And when Bill brought me to Maker's Mark in 2008, it was actually as director of operations, and then he moved me into the vice president position in 2010 over all of the operations in Loretto. And at the time, it was a great opportunity for me, to really coalesce everything that I had learned in my career and really step up to managing the distillery in Loretto. What I didn't realize until Bill actually told me was that I was the first woman to actually be doing that within the spirits industry. So it really has been a privilege. It's an honor, but it's a lot of work.
Of course, of course. But now, if we could backtrack a little bit, was it strange to be a woman even when you were at Beam? I mean, I can't imagine there were a lot of girls. You were surrounded by a lot of girls back then.
Was it strange to be a woman? Well, it was a little different moving to Kentucky and moving straight into the bourbon industry, because you're absolutely right. In the 1980s and the 90s, you didn't see a lot of women in meetings, when you were sitting in meetings, when you would be in different departments. And the level of participation and technical expertise was such that it was beginning to expand in the business as a whole. So I think that was where Booker, and then of course Bill, in bringing me over to Maker's Mark, really wanted to take advantage of what I knew and what I had experienced in the distillery.
Science has shown, too, that women actually have more olfactory cells. I mean, so we are actually designed to do this, right? Arguably better than men.
Differently. I think differently is the key. When we're talking about strengths and abilities and skills and attributes, yes, that is what I've heard, that women do have a scientific, better taste testing, better sensory. But I think that we come at things differently. I think that it's all about, how do you look at the process? How do you look at the big picture? And how do you utilize what people can do well? So yes, I think it is different, but I think it's all about really maximizing the use of all the differences. And yes, women definitely do have a lot to bring to the table.
It seems, though, that the bourbon industry, even more so than the wine world, is slower to bring women in. I mean, nowadays, especially, we're hearing more and more about women in the brown spirits, and there was just an ad campaign recently with a woman on the bottle. Today it seems to be more and more, but 5 years ago you couldn't say that.
That's very true, and I've given quite a bit of thought to that. Is why does the evolution seem so slow in certain fields? And it really isn't true. It's true for business today, if you look business as a whole. But we're just talking bourbon right now. So,
right.
That's kind of where my focus is. I think part of it is bourbon grows by the audience and the reach. So first you get people interested in the product. If you don't get the random few of us who are kind of techno geeks, if you will, I got pulled to the technology end of it. But if you have a broader conversation with a broader base of consumers, then you get more interest in the product and you get more interest in the business. Hence, you bring more people, different people, more women into a business that's been traditionally male. I think one of the things and I'm going to circle back to what you said at the very beginning of this conversation, there is a whole lot of science involved in distilling and in processing the product, and even in bottling, even in getting the label on straight every single time for every single bottle that you run, even in looking at our wax, making sure it's the right temperature every time we dip every single bottle. There is a lot of science in it, so you have to have a science background and an interest to come along within the business to different levels in the business. So there weren't a lot of us that entered, a lot of women that entered the bourbon industry in the 80s.
Right. Well, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense now, right? If you're saying, first of all, there weren't a lot of women in science, in bio and chemistry back then either. So that it would make perfect sense as to why there was a lack of women in the business. But there's also a lack of women drinkers, right? So, I mean, could we do like a 1-2 minute, what is bourbon? What kind of taste should I expect? What are the 4 W's? Can you go through all that real quick?
Well, what I look for, having been in the bourbon industry now for 29 years,
wow,
and so I've tasted lots of different bourbons, and what I come back to is everyone's palate is different, and everyone likes something different, and they like to drink it perhaps in a different manner. For me, what I look at is I look for a flavor that's more holistic. So when I take a glass of bourbon and I nose that glass of bourbon, I get a certain impression immediately. It's like meeting a person. It's your first impression, and you take it all in, the color, the nose, how it looks in the glass, how it kind of flows around the side of the glass. And then when you take your first sip and you just let it lay on your palate, swallow it, and then I like to blow out the alcohol. Does what happened on my palate match with what the first impression that nose was? And if there's a hand-in-glove fit, then it's something that I know that I'm going to enjoy.
Oh, interesting. And now, I mean, you have people who are very afraid of this kind of stuff still. I mean, you know, it sounds scary. Whiskey, rye, scotch. Do you drink it? Do you drink it neat? Do you drink it with ice? How do you recommend a beginner hop into this?
Yes. So I think you just have to jump, you know. It's no different than anything else in life. You have to weigh your risks. And if it's not going to get you too bad, if you jump in, you just jump in. What I love to do, though, really is a starting point. Makers is a very good place to start after 29 years in the bourbon industry. And the reason I say that, it's a great place to start. It's a great place to stay. But there are so many other different flavors and taste profiles that people can enjoy on a different basis with whatever the occasion is or their mood is, that there's so much variety. But what you do is you pick something and you start with that. So let's just say it's Maker's Mark, which, by the way, that was why Bill Sr. created Maker's 46, was just a little bit something. But for instance, you start with Maker's Mark. You pour it neat.
And
nose it a little bit.
By neat, you mean room temperature in a glass?
Yes, just warm, just a little bit in the glass. Take a little nose, and if it's like, whoa, then just back off of the glass a little bit. Take a little taste, just a teeny little taste. If it feels hot on your tongue, splash it with water. I mean, whatever it takes, so you can identify if there's a characteristic there that you will enjoy. And then once you find that, you just try it. Splash it with a little ginger beer. Put an ice cube in there. I think it's really all about trying until you find a way that you can enjoy it. Responsibly, of course, but that you can enjoy it.
And it's a sipping drink. It's not a slugging, chugging shot drink. Like, I think that's also something that people are starting to do more and more. Relax, take a second and sip something.
Yes, take a second and enjoy what you have. It's like everything else that we do, right? Whether we eat or we breathe or we are with friends, take a moment to enjoy where you're at.
Can you talk quickly about the 4 W's, water, wheat, wood, and wax?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So for Maker's Mark, of course, there are several components that we look at that truly has Maker's Mark differentiated from other products. The water is one, that's key. We mash. Every single fermenter is made of lake water that comes out of our limestone spring-fed lake that's on property. So every day our water is there. It comes straight out. We use that to ferment. And of course, in the ferment is the mash bill and the wheat. You know, and of course you know the story, but the reason that Bill used wheat was because he and Marge baked bread. And in the baking of the bread with the different grains, the wheat really came forward for them. It brought the palate forward. It made it be sweet, a sipping. And of course, as we know, there was a large farm near Maker's Mark in Loretto, and they were able to provide all of the wheat for Maker's Mark, and they still do to this day.
That's so cool.
The wood, of course, is very, very unique. In order to be considered a bourbon, it must be stored in a new charred oak container for a period of time. That's the TTB standard of identity for the United States government. So, of course, our barrels are all uniquely made in that our heads are a little thicker, our staves are a little thicker, and we have actually come to the perfect amount of char, which is a 40-second burn. That means the barrel's on fire for 40 seconds to get that perfect level of char in the barrel. And of course, right behind the char level is those caramelized wood sugars. Right. And it's the caramelized wood sugars that impart that luscious taste as well as the color in Maker's Mark as it ages. We rotate our barrels, so top floor to bottom floor throughout their life, half of their life upstairs, half of their life downstairs, and then, of course, the iconic wax. Every one of our bottles are hand dipped. in red wax.
But that's the science behind it to me too, right? This is all part of the equation. How much time does it spend upstairs? How much time does the barrel spend downstairs? How long do you char it for? And I think that at least is the part that fascinates me so much. There's way more to it than dropping some stuff in a big barrel and walking away for a couple years.
You are so right. Absolutely. We are hands-on with our barrels from the moment the whiskey goes into the barrels. We check them on an annual basis. Of course, every barrel sits with its bung up, which means no chance of leaking around the bung where the bung goes into the barrel. And then every year we check those barrels. And then after 3 summers or 3 years of upstairs, we bring them downstairs where they can be in a little bit cooler environment. It definitely does impact the flavor of
right,
every
of course.
barrel.
And that's the other thing too, temperature. We didn't even talk about that. All right, so you're this iconic woman now in the industry, and you have daughters. Are your daughters interested in entering the bourbon world?
No. My older daughter, Catherine, studied abroad a bit and came to the conclusion that she really was interested in law. So she is now a practicing attorney in the state of Maine. So she's not even close to me. And my younger daughter is here still in Kentucky, but she is looking for a different type of career where she can really make a difference with people, possibly in the medical field.
Right. So are they bourbon drinkers at least?
They are bourbon appreciators.
I know.
It's definitely been part of their upbringing because it's been what I do, and they both love the science behind it. They very much appreciate the product. They know the care that goes into it, and on occasion, yes, they do enjoy it.
Can we talk about the interstate shipping laws? Because they date back to Prohibition, and getting a bottle of alcohol over state lines is becoming more and more onerous. How does Maker's Mark handle something like that?
Well, that's part of the business that actually I can't really speak to too awfully well, other than I do keep up with what's going on with that. We as a company are trying to, work with the government. It's always about breaking down barriers, whether it's within businesses or without businesses, outside of the businesses, and being able to reach more people.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's almost like we're going backwards in time as opposed to moving forward. I love the idea, though, that so many more women are involved in this industry. And with that, you have all these other women's issues, which brings us to you as a breast cancer survivor. Can you just quickly, do you mind telling us a little bit about how that went down and how you are?
I absolutely don't mind, because again, it's like knowledge is power, right. And we have to have power to control our own destiny and what it is about us. So in January 2013, I signed up to go back to school, as a matter of fact, and get my MBA. And I had just started in the MBA program and was halfway through, and I got a call after vacation. And they said, you just had your mammogram. We need you to come back and have a follow-up. And I was like, oh, well, a follow-up. Why would I need a follow-up? I'm not at risk. No incidence of cancer anywhere in my family. Never had any kind of abnormality ever. Was healthy, and ate organic, did all the right things, exercised. I had just started running a few years ago, and I went back. And when I went back, the lady said to me, Ms. MacRae-Samules, would you be interested in our 3D mammogram? And I said, well, what is that? And she says, well, it's something that Women's Diagnostics, Dr. McLaughlin, has just started offering women patients, and it's really not covered by your insurance, so it's going to cost you about $50 to do it. But it's a new technology that allows earlier detection should you need earlier detection. And I said, well, I'm not at risk. Do you really think I need it? Well, of course, what would she say to me? She would say, it's really to you. She's not going to tell me what to do. So I thought, well, sure, why not? So I had that 3D mammogram, and the result of it was that they found 3 masses on the right side.
Whoa.
And they were very, very early stage. One was very early, one was medium early, and one was actually invasive, lobular carcinoma. And so I progressed. I progressed through my treatment. I obviously had to take a hiatus from my master's, but I progressed through my treatment and my surgeries, and it's now been 4 years. And I was very humbled to be able to be a keynote speaker at a breast cancer gala, annual breast cancer gala for Komen in Kentucky just a couple of weeks ago. And hearing the stories of the people, at that event, and hearing people speak to me about it, it's kind of like you need to recognize that you're not immune to anything.
Yeah.
You need to go in eyes wide open and take care of yourself. And I think that that's a message that many women hear but don't heed. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, sure. I have a job. I have children. I have family. I have my parents to care for. I have my siblings. I'll put it off. It's fine. It's fine. I'll get it later. Please don't get it later. If I could say one thing to every human being, even men can get breast cancer. Please be responsible about your health, because you're the only one that can be.
Amen. That's an amazing note to end this whole thing on. You are an inspiration. I am so happy we took the time to talk and learn and understand. And I'm so happy to hear, one, that you're healthy, two, that more women are entering this field, more women are drinking bourbon. I am on a mission to learn more about it myself. Victoria MacRae-Samules, Maker's Mark Bourbon, Vice President of Operations, thank you so much for taking the time with us. And I think we're all going to go have a glass of bourbon now.
Tracy, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.